Okay, so I'm going to start the hearing. It's our 7 o'clock hearing of the Milton Board of Appeals. My name is Jeffrey Mullen. I'll be acting as chair for this panel. With me is the actual chair of the Milton Board of Appeals, Kathleen O'Donnell, and member Christopher Hart. Welcome. Tonight's hearing is a hearing on the application of Antwerp Street Realty Trust, 10 Bassett Street, Milton, for variances in connection with the proposed operation of a restaurant at the so-called Milton Marketplace. And I know there are several people in the audience. I see the applicant's representatives. People are going to bear with me as I go through the file and let people know what we have in front of us and what we'll be hearing tonight. First thing I have is a letter from Michael Modestino, counsel to the applicant, dated December 12, which encloses copies of the Board of Appeals application, 3 copies of a plan. The application in this case is dated, bear with me, December 12. That's the December 12th application. I then have a submittal dated January 13, 2025, which additional materials to support the application were filed, consisting of a letter to the Milton Board of Appeals dated January 13, a letter from attorney Marion McKettrick, who I see is with us, dated January 29, setting forth the history of the Milton Marketplace and various decisions made by the board, and then a table of relief, which the board had requested that the applicant provide. That's the January 13th submittal. On January 24, Mr. Modestino provided 6 copies of amendments to the site plan and a flash drive containing those amendments, which are in the file. And then lastly, on January 28, 2025, the applicant submitted what I would consider an amended and restated application consisting of a letter from Michael Modestino and Marion McKettrick on the pending applications, an updated zoning history memo from Marion McKettrick, Esquire, various decisions of the Board of Appeals dating back to 1982, and a zoning table. This is the application we'll hear tonight. People who are listening may recall that this hearing had been postponed several times. The reason for the postponement is the board made a judgment that the application as set forth in the January 28th letter was different than the earlier applicant. And that it's the same project, but different types of relief were being sought. And so that everybody understood what it is we were here to hear, we thought that the ad needed to be revised. With respect to the January 28th application, which is the application that matters, the applicant is seeking 5 specific things, all to do with modifications to the variance. Number 1, a modification of the restaurant hours. Now they are permitted to operate 6:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and Sunday 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. They are, in this application, requesting permission to operate for the restaurant 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily, every day. That's number 1. Number 2, the restaurant seating. They've been currently permitted by the board to operate a restaurant with 70 seats. They are seeking 99 seats, all 29 seats in a new 29, all 29, that is the 29 additional seats in a new second floor seating area, plus the currently permitted 70. That's the second issue, seating. The third issue they seek the board's determination on is to determine the sufficiency of parking. This has to do with the fact that there's been no prior determination made, and don't believe one had been required at the earlier times. They're seeking a determination from the board that there's adequate parking for 99 seats at a ratio of 2.5 seats per parking space to equal the 40 required available spaces. And they're proposing some restrictions on the parking area after 7 p.m., that they would close the so-called back lot, leaving 91 remaining spaces. And just a note to the applicants, we expect that you'll be explaining this in detail when you present the case. So I just want to lay out for the audience of what we'll be hearing. They'll designate 6 spaces next to Bassett Street as employee parking, leaving 85 spaces, and they'll close 8 spaces next to the residences on Antwerp Street parking area, leaving 77 spaces. The fourth issue is security. In the 1982 variance, it was a condition that required 24-hour security, 365 days a year. They wanted to modify that condition. They want to modify that condition to require security during operating hours only. And the last is concerns baking on the premises. The 1982 variance condition prohibits baking on the premises. Condition has never been modified, even though by the 1984 modification in hours, it referred to a bakery. Applicant seeks to remove the condition prohibiting baking on the premises. So all of that is a way of saying that we're here for 5 reasons. Modifications to the restaurant hours, the restaurant seating. They want a determination on the sufficiency of parking for the restaurant. They want a modification on the condition with respect to security at the premises and the elimination of the prohibition on no baking at the premises. That is the application we have before us. I have other things in the file I'd like to explain. We have a memo from Milton Building Inspector Barry Ringler, who we asked to take a look at the premises. He has written to us and has indicated that the 1982 condition regarding security at 24 hours a day, 365 years is being provided during operating hours. So I would say that while the inspector didn't say it this way, I would say that that's out of compliance with the current requirement, but is consistent with what the applicant is seeking. That is, security is being provided only during operating hours. For background, Mrs. McKettrick's very helpful memorandum, which is in the board's file, just to give you a sense of the history of this property. The first variance was issued in 1982 by the Board of Appeals. There have been 22 subsequent variance amendments, special permits, and site plan approvals, all of which have been recorded in the Norfolk Registry of Deeds. Now, copies of those documents are in the board's files. They're too voluminous to read into the record tonight. Suffice to say, there've been as people know, there have been various changes and modifications to the original approvals over the years, which the board has documented and has noted in its file. Lastly, with respect to official correspondence, we asked the building inspector to make a survey of the premises and to indicate to the board whether or not the property is currently in compliance with the requirements of either the Board of Appeals or the Planning Board with respect to the several conditions regarding the occupancy of the premises. The applicant provided us a list, a summary list that the the building inspector verified. They did an inspection. The inspection is incomplete at this time. We did receive a memoranda this afternoon from the building inspector. I would say that a summary of it is that there's been substantial compliance with it, but there are several conditions regarding prohibition on overnight activities, including parking and the like, that were not able to be verified. The board has asked the building inspector to complete that report, and we will report on that prior to the completion of this hearing. Lastly, we've received correspondence from the public, members of the public, regarding this application. We received a letter dated March 10 from the East Milton Neighborhood Association, indicating that they would like several conditions on the property, including that the restaurant not open later than 9 p.m., not open on Sunday nights or close earlier than 3 p.m., that no parking be allowed in the back of the building close to the homes, that the windows need to be closed to minimize noise, no smoking at all on the property. They want conditions addressing neighborhood concerns over cooking odors in neighborhood through appropriate odor control systems. They want to require the restaurant to have an attendant present during all hours of operation to monitor parking. They want to provide a viable way for enforcing all the conditions granted by the ZBA. Current enforcement is lacking, especially concerning parking, double parking, and parking in handicap spaces. They want to address all variance issues currently outstanding for the Fruit Center, Abbey Park, and Novara, especially Abbey Park not being in compliance with parking requirements, having lost their parking lot before adding additional variances. Sincerely, the East Milton Neighborhood Association Board. We have a petition signed by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. By 25 people. I'll read it in 2 pages. We, the undersigned, are asking our elected officials to reject this application for a zoning variance for this project as currently proposed. We are asking the landlord to select an establishment with less adverse effects on the neighbors and more suitable for a residential area. Now, let me consult my file. I believe we have additional letters. I know we have additional letters here that I don't have in front of me. Bear with me. Okay. We have a letter from Elaine Hagen, Haghn. I apologize to Elaine if I've mispronounced the letter. It's a well-written letter. She lives at 84 Winthrop Street. She's lived there for 57 years. She grew up here and remember when the area was woods and Carlton Ford's barn was there. She writes a long letter of several concerns about the application. She indicates that she's not a shop owner, but she doesn't see how a restaurant operating after the shops close would help with their foot traffic. She was happy to see that they're proposing opening earlier at 8 for breakfast and also serving lunch. She would like to know if the town is willing to work with its residents on such an important decision for this proposed restaurant and bar. She indicates several concerns about the operation, the bar in particular, in a long and well-written letter. I have a letter here from Bob Kelly writing regarding the proposed restaurant. Mr. Kelly is objecting to the fact that no parking plan has been offered. Given the wildly successful Fruit Center parking lot is now completely full by 5 p.m., the board should inquire as to what specific off-street traffic management plans are proposed, what will be done with respect to Uber Eats, DoorDash, and the like. Mr. Kelly indicates that the ongoing aromas from Novara regularly infiltrate our neighborhood. This has been a consistent issue for a decade. The proposed site of Marabello will require more frequent deliveries of alcohol, produce, linen service, and garbage pickup. More large trucks will be cutting through the site. No other neighborhood in Milton remotely bears the traffic, congestion, and number of restaurants and liquor license in such proximity to homes as the Bassett Church, Franklin, Antwerp Street area does. I urge the board to make reasonable efforts to protect our neighborhood safety, welfare, and quality of life. Thank you for your consideration. That's from Mr. Kelly. I have a letter here from Keith and Jennifer Wrightington. They're members of Precinct 7 at 11 Church Street. They're emailing to voice their concerns over the restaurant, expressing concerns about the precedent, the hours of operation, the commingling of customers consuming alcohol with minors. The bar restaurant area is dissected by a hallway in the middle of 2 proposed bars, which will be shared by the customers of the CUE clothing store and the Toy Chest Nutshell shop, whose merchandise is aimed at birth to 12. We are asking our elected officials to reject this application for a zoning variance as currently proposed. We are asking the landlord to select an establishment with less adverse effects. Lastly, we've got a letter here from Paula Knuff Jabber. Actually, it's from Bertrand Jabber. He resides at 15 Pierce. It's on Paula's email. Resides at 15 Pierce Street, writing, expressing my concerns about the proposed bar. The bar restaurant is dissected by a hallway. He's concerned about the hours of operation, especially in the warmer seasons. It's my hope that the restrictions will be imposed for the closure of the bar by 9 p.m. to allow peaceful enjoyment. Thank you in advance. Now, just before this hearing, bear with me, just before this hearing, we also received letters from Catherine Wynn and Suzanne Lombardi. Both of which are in the board's file. Well, let me just address those briefly. Um, Catherine Wynn indicates that she's been a Milton Precinct 2 resident for 30 years. She's writing to echo concerns of her neighbors to the east regarding yet another restaurant in the square, this one at the Fruit Center. The traffic and parking problems in the square, the constant tie-up on Willard Street, lack of any enforcement ever, are all an issue. They're a disaster at present, according to Ms. Wynn. I've seen very large, often refrigerator trucks early in the AM. She patronizes the Fruit Center and has always found the owners to be conscientious corporate citizens, but a full-service restaurant and bar, which I understand will span the common space hallway and from which patrons will spill over and servers will traverse. All of this is inconsistent with the atmosphere of small shops. I'm a frequent patron of Abbey Park, Novara, and the Fruit Center. We have many, many opportunities eating and drinking in and around Milton. Traffic and parking problems in East Milton have never been adequately addressed, at least in the last 30 years, and the two new developments are going to exacerbate these problems. That's from Catherine Wynn. And then Susan Lombardi has indicated that she writes a letter to the Board of Appeals, care of Mr. Donnelly, and addressing Ms. Hall, the chairman of the planning board, as well as Catherine O'Donnell, as I said, the actual chair of the board, writing to respond to a letter submitted by the applicant. She strongly disagrees with several key points in Mr. Modestino's letter, a misrepresentation of the facts contrary to their claim. They believe there are inaccuracies. The plate was never provided with advance notice. The lack of disclosure is a significant omission. She indicates that there is she's got a lot of concern about issues related to the operation of the Fruit Center Marketplace management team. They had told her that they had decided that their lease would not be renewed when it was up at the end of 2025, denying any further negotiations. The buyout offer was presented as a take it or leave it proposition with no opportunity for negotiation. Her second dispute indicates a mischaracterization of the lease buyout. She takes issues with the characterization of the lease buyout as substantial cash payout that was willingly accepted by Suzanne Lombardi. She's concerned that the letter sent by Mr. Modestino to the planning board and posted on social media is attempting to spin a narrative to avoid accountability. The circumstances surrounding the plate's departure from the Fruit Center were marked by a lack of transparency throughout the process. The plate was never a serious consideration as operators of the new expanded space. I accepted a modest buyout offer as a restaurant without a lease is essentially worthless. I was left with little choice. That said, I'm proud of the plate's legacy in the community we built. I want to ensure the story is remembered accurately. I'll truly miss seeing our valued guests each day. Thank you for your attention to this matter. That is, sorry to take people's time to do that, but I thought it was important that people had a sense of what the board has in front of it, and what materials have been submitted to the board for consideration of this hearing. But tonight, we're going to hear from the applicant. The board will have an opportunity to take questions from the applicant. The applicant will have the opportunity to respond to those questions. We'll take testimony from members of the audience who are in support of or who are in opposition to this application. I don't know that we'll get through all of the matters. I don't know that we'll get through all of the issues in front of the board tonight. And I've previously indicated that we need to supplement the materials because we need more information from the building inspector. So people should be prepared that we don't have the full record in front of us. And I do want to hear from Mr. White in particular about compliance with the existing variance. With all that said, I see that Mr. Modestino is here, and Ms. McKettrick, his co-counsel, is here representing the applicant. Welcome to the Board of Appeals. How may we help you tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. I am here with Marion McKettrick. She's seated next to me, and she will speak as well when
Welcome.
I'm done. And Mark McNosa, I'm calling him my last name. Mark McNosa is here. He's filling in for his brother, who happens to be away right now. He's very familiar with the store in Milton, and he knows everything that I know about it. So he's here also to speak as necessary. If I may, as far as the letters are concerned, I really haven't had a lot of opportunity or time to read these documents, particularly the one that just came in before the meeting from Ms. Lombardi. And I really don't want to comment about it at this point, other than the fact that I've never made any misrepresentation about anything, and I would resent that. And we'll come back to that at some point. I don't want that to go down that track of talking about that and nothing else. I want to talk about the positive things that the applicants are seeking to do.
That's noted. The board will provide you with an opportunity to reply.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As far as the first application that we submitted on December 12th of 2024, that was to change the hours from 6:30 a.m. until 10 p.m. We later learned that we didn't want to do that. The applicant didn't want to do it, and they wanted the hours at 8 a.m., and that had to do with the possible tenant that might be coming in. Those are the hours that they wanted. So we subsequently changed that in one of the applications, the next one. The applicants are seeking relief in concerning the ZBA appeals hearing on October 5th, 1982. For 24 hours, 365 days a year security provided by the store owner. That was put out there way back when, but unfortunately, I think they lost track of that and they didn't really understand it. Certainly, Michael and Mark McNosa came on much later than that. And we're asking for relief on that one. We don't think that it's necessary to have 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Security, we're asking it to be a lesser time period and something that would be in accordance with when the place was open, when the stores were open. And it would be secure, it would be safe, and no one would be at risk. The other thing that we wanted to clarify with the Zoning Board of Appeals was the cooked food items. There was some indication that they were not allowed to do that, going way back when, having baked items. And we would suggest that there have been permits that have been issued to my client. One of them is to the Fruit Center Inc., and it's a permit in conformity with the statutes and ordinances, and it allows cooking to occur on the premises. There's also another application, and this has been renewed year to year. This is for the Fruit Center Commissary, and a application was hereby granted for a food establishment permit, and that goes from year to year. So those are the three things that we set out to do: the hours, the being open for 365 days a year, and whether or not we could cook on the premises. Thereafter, I submitted an amendment to the initial application, and I made it clear that we're seeking an amendment to the use variance granted in 1982 and subsequent amendments for hours and for use in expanded indoor seating area. And at that point, we asked that the expanded hours be from 10 p.m. From the 9 p.m. that was authorized before. And when it was authorized before, it was authorized for the plate, and they were allowed to stay open from 6:30 in the morning until 9 p.m. at night. My clients, as the applicants, didn't need to be open at 6:30 at night. They could be open at 8 a.m. in the morning, but they did need to be open to 10 p.m. because that's what the possible tenant had requested. They had, in fact, when we started, they had requested longer periods of time, but we discussed it and felt that the 10 p.m. time was the better time for that. Subsequently, we submitted another application to clarify what we were trying to do, and that was the January 18th one that was submitted, and that had to do with expanding of the hours again. And again, so that the hours would be 8 a.m. opening instead of 6:30 p.m. and closing at 10 p.m. as requested in the application. So we've submitted numerous documents to the ZBA concerning why we were seeking the relief that we're seeking. We don't think that it's very unreasonable, the things that we've asked for. I think I'm going to have Marion address some specific issues that she has researched and she's gone over very, very carefully. And I'm here to address any other questions that may come up as well. Thank you. Marion?
We're all using one computer, so excuse that. Yes, I'm Marion McKettrick. I'm an attorney, and probably in December or January, I forget, late December, the owners of the fruit center who had been already in about 3 months of discussion with the planning board about this restaurant application asked me to become involved and to work with Attorney Modestino, primarily to research all of the existing decisions for the fruit center. To look at all of the conditions, try to figure out, whether there were conditions that may have lapsed, that were no longer being used because that really wasn't the way the fruit center was operating, so on and so forth, or to just see whether they were out of compliance and needed to make some changes. So that actually was pretty complicated. I did research at the registry, and that was the best way I found to find all of the site plan approvals, all of the special permits, all of the variances. So just very quickly to summarize that, I also looked at the history of the fruit center site before the first use variance was granted in 1982, but focusing particularly on that. In 1982, the Mignosa family, still at that time, brought forward this proposal to enlarge a building that was on the premises to have a grocery store, basically a small grocery store on 2 levels, and to have numerous small shops. And there were a lot of shops allowed by the original permit, something like 13. I'm not reading from my list but the Board of Appeals has summaries of each one of those decisions, as well as the grocery store. And soon after that, a drugstore on the first floor. At various times, there was a fish market, there was a bakery. They're all mentioned in different decisions. They didn't necessarily result in additional conditions, but they're mentioned and they were there. I've lived in Milton a long time. I remember there was a bakery there at one time. So I was a little bit surprised to find a condition in 1982 that said there was no baking allowed in the premises. So this is an example of a condition that the board, since we're reviewing everything now, regardless of what happens with this particular application, the Board of Appeals needs to, for those things that we've requested, consider modifying some of those original conditions that really no longer apply and haven't for many years to this operation. Second condition was they didn't want a fast food restaurant here, and we've never really wanted fast food restaurants in Milton. And so that was a condition, but the way of describing it was food prepared on the premises. That's no longer really, that's not applicable. I mean, there's all kinds of food prepared and sold in the grocery store. You can go in and buy your prepared dinner and take it home. You can buy soup and so forth. So that's a condition that needs to be modified. And then the condition that there be 24-hour, 365 days a year security, that was in existence in 1982. I don't know whether the enterprise began with that type of security, but for many years it hasn't had that. It's had security when the businesses were open. So that's an example of a condition that requires reconsideration and possibly modification. The building inspector did tell me, and I believe he said this in his report, that there have been no complaints about after-hours problems at the site. So it doesn't seem, although it might have been a concern, people thought there might be a problem in the parking lot after hours, doesn't seem as though that's really been an issue. But so then what I was, of course, primarily concerned with were all the conditions about hours and the building itself and the seating, if there were any, and possibly parking and the sufficiency of parking, because those all relate to the current application. So I found numerous decisions relating to hours. But after reviewing all of them, what it really boils down to is that today, from Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., businesses at the fruit center are allowed to be open. So that wasn't true in the beginning, but that is true now. Restaurants were a little bit different. Restaurants asked for somewhat different hours at different times. The most recent decision was the one for the plate, and that allowed operating hours of 6:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. at night, Monday through Saturday. Then on Sunday, they were allowed to have hours of 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. So one difference between all of those decisions and the one before you tonight is that the fruit center ownership is asking you to consider whether the hours for a restaurant could be allowed to be 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. on a daily basis. That's a change because being open, having the restaurant open in the evening on Sunday has not been allowed up until now. Restaurants are allowed to be open until 6:30 p.m., but not until 10 p.m. And then the additional hour of 10 p.m. beyond the 9 p.m. is a change. The seating arrangements this whole proposal really has come about because the one physical change that the Fruit Center has been able to make in its facility of any substance was that about 3, 4, or 5 years ago, they were able to enclose a patio area on the second floor and make it an enclosed space. So that enclosed space initially was approved for general seating. Anyone who wanted to could go in there and sit there with a sandwich or meet their friends or bring a coffee in from the plate. They could walk across the hall. It wasn't specified to be used just by the restaurant. What we're asking for in this application is to have that space be designated as restaurant space. And the plans that you've been given, I believe you have layout plans for inside the restaurant, and you also have a site plan for outside the restaurant. The inside plans show you that there is proposed, as with the other restaurants, general service restaurants always will propose a bar. It's one of the things that allows them to make enough money to stay in business. So this space is proposed to have a bar with 16 seats, and the remainder of the 99 seats will be regular seats. So I don't know what that percentage is. Somebody can calculate it off the top of their head. It's definitely not a bar with a few seats. It's the other way around. Whether you like the presence of a bar or not, or you like to drink. I don't really drink anymore, but a lot of people do like to. The bar is not most of the seating in the restaurant or even close to it. So I think it's important to point that out. However, the bar is located in the new seating area. So it does sort of set it forth as a separate area. I think that's created a lot of discussion and concern. The restaurant operators we've talked to have said, well, when you have, your bar is operated by people who've been trained, no drinks are allowed to be picked up and carried across the hall into another part of the restaurant. That doesn't happen, and it won't happen. But that's something that people have commented on and really not sure how it would work. Yet the other part about the layout inside the restaurant that I want to point out is that there are not 2 bars. That continues to be a misconception. There is an area at the entrance of the restaurant where the plate used to be, where there would be a pizza oven, and there's an area for serving lunch in small plates. I don't know exactly what you call it. At one point, they did call it a bar, but it wasn't a liquor bar. They changed the name because there was so much concern about that and confusion that there were 2 bars. For the layout plan that you have for the outside of the restaurant, which relates in part to previous decisions, when the Fruit Center was approved in 1982, there was a layout plan. Fencing was required around the exterior. There was landscaping. I think there were 141 parking spaces initially. Later on, after Comcast moved out of the area near Antwerp Street, the Fruit Center was able to create additional parking. So they now have 191 parking spaces in this parking lot. This is by far the biggest parking area in East Milton Square. It is much, much bigger than any parking area attributable to any other restaurant use. And it is, in fact, a parking area for shoppers to use. Predominantly, it's Fruit Center shoppers, but legally, it's open to everybody. And in the evening, it's available until the parking area closes. That's part of the original permit in 1982. What the applicants are proposing to you, so this site plan has been reviewed several times, principally in 2018 and 2019 by the planning board. They gave site plan approval for some reconfiguration of the parking, a little bit safer arrangements with more islands and directional markings, various things to make the parking area safer. But it's still a 191 space parking lot. What the applicants are proposing for after, I have to look back at the application. I think it's after 8 p.m. But anyway, they're proposing to close the rear parking area. It has 91 spaces in it. They're proposing to turn off the lights in the rear parking area. And they're proposing not to put out any rubbish or anything like that after 8 p.m. So basically, they're proposing to discontinue all activity in that rear parking area. That's to address the concern by the neighbors that there would be a lot of noise generated by traffic from this restaurant right next to all the houses that are in back of this site.
Excuse me, the application indicates 7. It's after 7 is what's been
After 7.
I'm
proposed.
sorry, 7 p.m. I'm sorry. Yeah, I've looked at it various times. I just didn't remember. Okay, same. So this applies to all of the changes in the parking area. On Antwerp Street, the proposal is to not use parking spaces that back onto houses on Antwerp Street. Those are on the right side of the Antwerp Street area of the parking lot. The proposal is also to close the Antwerp Street entrance and exit from the parking lot. And I'm looking at Mark to make sure I'm stating this correctly. That's to avoid excess traffic, if there is any, from restaurant use going back out onto Antwerp Street. The next part of the change to the parking area is that there are going to be 6 employee parking spaces designated along Bassett Street, so that employees will have to park further away, and restaurant and other shoppers and so forth can park a little bit closer to the building. Let's see, those are the principal changes to the parking. That leaves, I'm not going to try to give you the numbers, but it's in the application. That leaves ample parking space using the ratio of 2.5 seats for every 1 parking space. I think it's something like 3 times or 4 times what would be required. And so those statistics are basically provided to justify the adequacy of parking in the parking area.
The application indicates that 40 parking spaces are required, and there's 77 that'll be available after you back out the.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. So those comments are intended to address the particular forms of zoning relief that we knew would be required for this application. I think you can see from all the letters that the persistent concern really has to do. Oh, finally, yeah, one other thing, couple of other things. Noise from I watched a lot of the planning board hearings, and the concern was, well, you're going to have a restaurant there. It's going to operate later hours. It's going to be really noisy. People are going to be, the windows will be open, and you know how noisy restaurants can be. So early on in the application process, the applicants decided and spoke to the person they were talking to who could operate this restaurant, whether the windows would just be closed. And that's the plan at the present time. They even went to the trouble of taking extremely noisy, I don't know what you used exactly, but something very noisy inside the restaurant area, which is an open space right now, but the windows are in. And opening and closing the windows and recording the noise outside. And once the windows were closed, you couldn't hear anything. That's not a technical noise study. But it was interesting, and at least for me, it showed me that the windows are very effective at keeping the noise inside the restaurant. The other thing the applicants have done, I don't think it's been mentioned to you yet, is that they the applicants hired a noise consultant. He has prepared a study. It's Ascend Tech Acoustics Company Technology. I don't know the name of it is exactly, but anyway, these are engineers who specialize in measuring noise. And they were asked to measure the existing noise outside the fruit center on the parking lot side. And that study then becomes a baseline against which, if a restaurant were permitted to operate here, Noise could then be measured 6 months or a year after it's in operation. There could be a condition relating to, no substantial increase in noise because of the restaurant. The planning board had suggested at one time, or one of the members had, that this would be a tool that they would like to have. That were we to get to that point with this application, that this would be a condition, and it could be a condition in the application. The only other, the letter is several pages long. I do think one of the things they did note is it's a noisy site because it's next to the expressway. So, there is a considerable amount of ambient noise. We certainly don't want to add a lot more noise from a restaurant. Everybody has to deal with the ambient noise as it is. And if you live in those on Antwerp Street, you definitely can hear some of it, even when you're further back on the street. So I just want to wrap up that summary of the zoning cases and what I learned from them by saying that I was interested in the rationale that the Board of Appeals provided in their initial 1982 decision for allowing this use, because we've heard a lot of talk, and I know it's a sensitive issue. We have residential areas around here. We have residential areas at the edge of the business district, and they are impacted by whatever's happening in the business district. So what the Board of Appeals said really principally were two things. One is that this is a very difficult site because all along one edge is the expressway. There's already a lot of noise. It's not a highly desirable site for residential use, even though most of the site is zoned residential. They also looked at prior uses on the site. They looked at the fact that there had been business uses for many years. I didn't see any evidence that anybody went back and actually documented, but anyone who's older and has been here a long time probably remembers there was a small fruit center stand, some kind of building. Then there was some kind of car dealership or car building there. And what I remember, because I had just moved to Milton, and this happened shortly afterwards, was that there was a proposal to build a high-rise elderly housing development, a 40B development on the site. It didn't proceed. There was a lot of opposition, would have changed everything around the site. And this proposal came after that. So it was, those were the zoning, that was the rationale in terms of zoning that the Board of Appeals provided for allowing the use. So we haven't tried to change the use, or nobody's tried to change the use. In fact, there's been almost no increase in size in this building. There were 3 applications approved for additions to the second floor, and none of them were built, primarily because of the ability of the building to hold up an additional structure. And there was you probably remember, some of you were approving a stacker parking proposal. That was approved, but that was never built as well. The very small additions that have been built have been to provide a little more office space, a handicapped access bathroom, a little more space in back to locate the rubbish storage area, and then hours and in mostly hours, actually. That's one of the biggest things. And then these restaurant proposals at various times. So there has been no change in use proposed. This is still a commercial building with shops and restaurant, some kind of restaurant use. So I do realize this is a different kind of restaurant proposal. There's a lot we can think about with regard to that. Well, what I think the applicants are trying to do for you tonight is to show you what mitigation they're proposing for some of the concerns that neighbors have. I think you may have a lot more questions about details of operation, or who knows what. So I'll wrap up my quick summary of zoning, and I'd be happy to answer questions if you have more questions about the prior decision.
Thank you, Marion. Does the applicant have anything else they'd like to add at this time?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Mullen, I would just like to add that if we have 16 bar seats, as we call them, and 83 regular seats in the restaurant at tables, we're talking about 16.16% of the seating would be in the bar area. And when we say in the bar area, I mean, we vision that to be people going in there for a dinner, having a drink, and not just going in there to drink. And that would totally be controlled by the applicant. And 83.84% of the seats would be in the restaurant itself. in the tables that are out there. I would also add in that my client has engaged the EMAID system to install 3 systems for the commercial kitchens on the premises, and that's in the works right now. I would also suggest that the Axatech, Accentech, I believe it's called, they clearly indicate in the report that we've submitted that the noise criteria is under 62 dBA. It's more in the range of 45 to 50. Sometimes it's less than 25. So it seems to be totally under control, the noise factor that everyone is concerned about. And my client would continue to make sure that it's adhered to. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that all that the applicant has at this time?
I mean, I could respond to some of the letters. I haven't had a great opportunity to look at them, but I think one of the recurrent themes that I keep seeing is that there's 2 bars. There are not 2 bars. There's one bar as such. I still call it a part of a restaurant. When you go into, numerous restaurants in the area, you're always going to see a bar of some sort. And this is not going to be a huge bar. It is anticipated that people will eat while they're having a drink or two, and that's going to be monitored very closely by the bartenders. As far as some of the other things that I've seen in the letters, and most of them came today, some of them came in the afternoon, I would say that I understand the citizens' concerns, and we respect their concerns. They live in the neighborhood. We want to treat them well. We want to make sure that they're protected. But this is not intended to cause noise problems, crowd problems, drinking problems. We don't see any of that happening, and we're certainly here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I have questions, but let me ask members of the board, my colleagues, if they've got questions of the applicant with respect to what we've heard so far. Ms. O'Donnell.
I just had actually one question because I was looking at all the plans and I don't actually see someplace, and maybe I'm not looking in the right spot, what the separation line in the zoning districts is. I know we talked there's a residential area, but I know that some of it's zoned commercial, and I just kind of wonder where that dividing line is between those 2 zones.
I don't know that the line is shown on the plan. I can
It
tell you
isn't.
that it's along it's the strip along the expressway edge.
Oh, okay. All right.
So the business district, for one reason or another, logically enough, I guess, was extended all along that edge. But then I don't know how many feet it is. I'd have to, we should put that on there.
I just was, as I said, it was curious because I mean, we've always talked I sat on the hearing for the parking, the stacked parking. But there was never, I was just trying to remember where that dividing line might be. Because to remember the fact that some part of this property is in fact zoned commercial, so.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my only question at the moment.
Mr. Hart.
Not at the moment, Mr. Mullin, thanks.
Let me ask let me ask the applicant. Can you tell us where you are with the planning board?
Well, we have a hearing on Thursday night, and the hearing that was scheduled before, I think there were 2 of them, were postponed until after the zoning board hearing was held. That was my understanding.
Has the planning board indicated they want to hear from the zoning board before they proceed with the application in front of the planning board?
I would say that's fair. I've been watching those hearings. I haven't been participating in them. This is the problem that has arisen, and I think it's important to point this out, although it's neither here nor there in terms of your approval. As of last summer, there were building permit applications filed with the building department for some construction work at the Fruit Center for potentially this space. And nothing ever came back from those building permit applications, and there was no denial letter issued, which in my opinion should have happened at that time. The denial letter should have said that in order to do this for X, Y, if you need more hours or whatever it is you're looking for, just like they always do in the building department, they issue a denial letter. It tells you what you need relief from the Building Board of Appeals for. That was never issued. That was a source of a great deal of confusion for the applicants. So they finally went ahead and filed their site plan application, modification application in early October.
Yes.
Because the planning board said, we want a modification application when we approved the stairway that you put in and approved that enclosed space, we didn't know you wanted to use it for a restaurant. And we didn't know what you wanted to use those stairs for. So we want you to come back. And so they went back and they had they had many sessions of hearings, I don't know how many, with the planning board, discussing many of the issues that are before you tonight. And that was confusing for everybody, including the planning board, just because the planning board didn't really have authority to grant additional hours. They don't have the authority to approve the additional seating because site plan review is basically external to the building. And so it just went on. And then at one point, the application was withdrawn and then it was refiled. In between, they wanted an opportunity to talk more to neighbors and talk to everybody about what they should be asking for. They refiled the application and that's where they are now. And they've had a couple of hearings, and the planning board does very much want to hear from the Board of Appeals, maybe not definitively, but they'd like to get some feedback about the zoning relief that is required in order to do what the applicants are asking to do here. And it's dragged on for an awful long time. I think it's hard on everybody, but I do want to explain that the reason they weren't before the Board of Appeals was that they never had instruction to do that, and then really wasn't clear to anybody exactly what relief was required when. I didn't get involved in this until December, but looking back on it, I think that's been a problem for the town. It's been confusing. It's taken a lot of time. The one advantage, though, of having been before the planning board for all this time is a lot of these concerns have come out and been discussed, and the mitigation the applicant is proposing that's a response to the concerns that they've heard. And they have heard these concerns already. Whether they can resolve them or not, we don't know that, or whether you will be able to work out something that will work for everybody. But I do want to say that I don't think the planning board will be able to issue a final site plan approval decision unless it has some kind of feedback from the Board of Appeals, even if it's just comments tonight. You may not conclude your hearing, but maybe you'll have some comments and maybe they will be so instructive or informative that a clearer course of action will be obvious to everybody. So thank you.
I have a question on the seating. I've counted the 99 spaces. This is how it looks to me like it works. There are 19 seats in the sandwich area. There are 32 seats in the dining area. And there are 48 seats in the bar area, not 16.
In the bar itself, there are 16 seats.
Yeah.
It's not all bar seating. That's seating.
That's a small detail. There are 48
It's a
seats.
separate room, though. Yes.
The issue is, the question isn't how many people are going to sit at the bar.
Okay.
The question is how many people are sitting in the bar area.
All right.
Because this restaurant has two areas. Tell me if I'm wrong. That's what I understand this to be. The restaurant has two areas. There's 99 seats. 48 of those seats are in the bar area. The rest of them are in the balance of the restaurant area. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, when a
51
patron,
the restaurant area.
yeah, okay. So so the percentage is different. It's about half of the seats are in the bar area and half are not in the bar area.
Well, I think in terms of liquor licenses.
Yeah,
Well,
I
liquor
have a
license
question.
is the seating at the bar, that's the bar seating, but I know these are two different rooms. I get what you're talking about.
If I'm in the bar, if I go to this restaurant and I present myself that I want to have something to eat at this restaurant, and I don't know where I want to sit. Do I go to one door? Are there two doors? How does it work? Is it really one place or is it two?
There is one place which will be actually near where the plate had its entrance. Am I correct? That's where you will go to be seated. Then you'll be taken to whatever seats are available or wherever you want to sit. If you say you want to sit at the bar to eat, order your food and have a drink, and there's room, that you can be seated at the bar. Otherwise, you'll be seated at a table, either a low top or a high top, and it will be in one of the two rooms.
If I don't sit in the bar area, am I not able to get alcohol?
you will be able to get alcohol, but
If
your
I don't
waitress
sit
or
there.
waiter will manage that. You won't go.
Regardless of where I am in the restaurant, I'll have access to alcohol.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. And will an issue that's come up more often than, one of the primary issues is commingling of patrons between the two spaces. How is that going to be controlled?
You mean from one part of the restaurant to the other?
Yes.
Nobody will be allowed to carry a drink. You can go to the bathroom, but you can't pick up your drink. You can't carry your drink from one part of the restaurant to the other. You have to be seated to get a drink, and you have to leave your drink at your seat. Is that right?
Who's
That's
enforcing-
correct. And also if one person, two people were outside at one of the tables in the restaurant area as such, and that person wanted to go to the bar, they can't take their drink over there. They have to have one of the waiters do that. And that's that they've decided to do.
That sounds tricky to me. I just want to put that out there. That sounds difficult.
They just don't want people walking around with
Could
drinks.
be the places I frequent. I will admit that, but that sounds tricky. Let me, is there anything that the board has done in the past or that may need to be done with respect to the selling of alcohol at the premises? Have we previously discussed this at all in any of the matters that we've heard here since 1982? Has it ever been an issue in front of the
So
board?
the first liquor license was the one issued to the Plate in 2014. There was
Right.
no liquor license, well, there weren't even any liquor licenses available, it's home rule petition process. The first one was the one in 2000, and whenever it was issued, 2015 to the Plate. That's the first time. I don't know, do you remember that? Were you representing them?
Yes, that was the first time.
So what did you want to know about that?
I'm
Well,
wondering.
when it was the Plate, you could have eaten outside at the deck. And I don't recall, I don't actually never went there when they were serving alcohol, but you could presumably, I suppose, have gotten your sandwich and everything at dinner and walked outside to the deck, crossing that hallway.
They would ask you sometimes if you wanted to sit out there.
Yeah.
And I guess they would they had the little buzzer, bring
Uh-huh.
as far as the alcohol goes, I can't speak to it because I wasn't there when they were serving alcohol. Anybody, how did it work? Do you know?
No, they got their alcohol at the counter and they took it to their seat.
Okay, so I know you can't hear him, but Mark McNoza
Mark, come over here.
had said that he's going to come over and speak, but that they would get their, it was very different at the Plate, obviously. They didn't have a
Yeah.
bar. They would get their alcohol at the counter. They had a glass enclosure, I remember, with different types of alcohol in it, pay for it, and then they would just take it with them to wherever they wanted to sit. And honestly, I'm not aware that that a patron couldn't take their alcohol and their plate of food and go out and sit on the enclosed deck. Because I know when I would order my food, I would be asked if I wanted to sit out there.
Yeah. I said, yeah.
That's
So
a-
that's sort of the
very
same kind of traffic pattern that people are talking about with this one, where
Yeah,
you
you'd have to, it would be brunch where there would be more service of alcohol probably, right?
Mm.
They had a brunch.
Correct. I really wasn't up there, so I couldn't really see what they were doing. But again, the alcohol was purchased at the counter. You took it from the counter and took it to your seat, wherever that seat was, outside or inside.
Okay, we're gonna have to come back to the, I think we're gonna need some clarification on the issue of alcohol here and how it's gonna be used and how it's gonna be enforced, but I don't have any further questions at this time, and let me ask, members of the board whether they've got any questions.
Well, I'm just curious about the alcohol, whether that's something that we consider or that's under the license they have from the liquor license.
Well, what I can tell you.
As am I.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Do you want me to answer that? Because I've done
Yeah.
liquor licenses.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the restaurant liquor license is a very detailed application, actually. It requires a architect's layout of the restaurant. The plan needs to show where the bar area is, how many seats there are in the bar area, how many seats there are for general seating. The liquor license application has to propose hours of service for liquor service. and commonly would include an hour at which no more, drinks can be served. Depends on the restaurant, of course. And then there are all kinds of conditions about the training of staff that serve alcohol. And my understanding is that the staff has to be trained in a certain way. This is all Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission, state regulations. The staff has to take training every year, and they have to be able to show that they've been trained every year. So there's actually quite a lot of regulation for how alcohol is served and who is able to serve it. And the restaurant is responsible, for example, for denying service to a patron who's had too much to drink or is trying to drink without food. The regulations also require that food be served with alcohol, that when it's a restaurant, a bar and a restaurant, it's not a bar per se, and you're not supposed to sit at the bar and just be given drinks by the bartender without getting food. I think you may have one drink or something like that. Then you have to have food in front of you. So those are some of the things I remember. So we have a site plan approval application that's pending. We have a Board of Appeals application that's pending. Then there's a liquor license application that's pending, and it has to be a new liquor license for this restaurant. It's not the same liquor license as the Plate had. And it's conceivable, of course, that you could decide certain conditions were appropriate, and then the applicant could go to the liquor license hearing and hear from the select board that they didn't like those conditions and that they were going to be more restrictive. I don't think they would be less restrictive. I think it would be more likely that they would be more restrictive. So it's certainly of mutual concern for the Board of Appeals and for the select board how liquor will be served and what the arrangements will be in this particular configuration of restaurant space.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kathleen,
I just said thank you. That's all.
Mr. Hart, any further questions at this time?
No, thank you.
Let me ask if there's anybody in the audience who'd like to speak in support of the application. Mr. Donnelly, could you recognize anybody who'd like to speak in support of the application?
I do not see any hands raised.
Can I ask if anybody is in the audience who'd like to speak in opposition to the application?
Andrew D'Amato has raised his hand.
Mr. D'Amato, welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you. I
You're welcome.
appreciate the opportunity to clarify a few things. My name's Andrew D'Amato. I live at 26 Pierce Street. I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 7. I'm currently on the board of the East Milton Neighborhood Association. And full disclosure, my wife is Suzanne Lombardi, who owned the Plate. So I can shine a little light on the way they did business. It's unfortunate that Mike Mignosa, who is going to be the proprietor, is not there, nor I don't believe Vance Walsh is in the audience either. So a few questions probably can't get answered tonight. Just to clarify a few things. The Plate, the area, Ms. McKetrick said that the area outside was closed in about 5 years ago or so. That's incorrect. It was just recently closed in. Maybe she just misspoke, but that just happened. She said it was for anybody who wanted to come out and have a sandwich or some prepared food from downstairs. That is also incorrect. It was exclusive to the Plate users only, and the Plate paid rent for that space. So those are two key things there. As far as alcohol went, any alcohol that was served was purchased, which, to be honest, there wasn't a lot. Probably not even enough to pay for the license. Was carried by her staff who went through the SIP program. The SIP program is designed to teach people all about alcohol and how to serve it. Unfortunately, no one ever comes around to check that. It's sort of a dog with no teeth sort of thing. So I just have a few questions. The pizza bar, I assume there's going to be alcohol at the pizza bar, right? So according to what Ms. McKettrick said about Navarro, I don't know if it's true of this place, but you're going to have a 2-drink maximum, and you're going to have food. Now that's all great, although that was that was the case at Navarro, but in actuality, that didn't happen, and it doesn't happen still at this time. And anybody who's been to Navarro will attest to that. I mean, so these, some of these conditions are great on paper, but in reality, there's no one really watching this stuff. So we're hesitant in the neighborhood to grant these restrictions because they're never upheld. So, we really need things that can be upheld in concrete. The parking lot issue, the parking lot is big, but it's always full. Anybody who's been there will tell you that, especially around 6 o'clock at night. And the restaurants do a brisk business at 6 o'clock at night. Now, maybe Mr. Mondesino is going to tell you, as he did before, that generally speaking, no one goes there then. I would say stop in at Navarro at 6 o'clock at night. All the street parking is taken, and the place is pretty well packed. This is a suburban restaurant. We're not talking about downtown. People eat earlier. As far as the parking goes, a question: will Navarro and Abbey Park be allowed to use this lot, seeing as that they have lost a key component to their special permit, Navarro special permit, they use that parking lot, which is now going to be a 40B project. That parking lot is now gone. It is closed off. Where are those people parking? And I'll tell you where they're parking. They're parking in front of their neighbors' houses in their driveways, sometimes blocking their driveways. This has become a bigger and bigger problem. So when we speak about parking for the 10 Bassett Street restaurant, we also have to take into consideration the new variable that no one's considering is that now there's no parking or less parking for Navarro and Abbey Park. This is going to make the parking issue at the Fruit Center much more difficult. And that I would hope that this board takes that into consideration. There's 6 employee parking spaces. I wasn't sure, where were those? Were they on Bassett Street?
That's what the application says.
No, they're in the parking lot next to Bassett Street.
Okay, on the plate. How many employees do you think the restaurant's going to have? Mark?
I couldn't say. I don't run a restaurant.
Yeah.
Wait,
Vance? Well, he's not here.
do we answer the question?
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
My understanding from Michael was that the employees would be anywhere between 10 and 15, and as the night went on, it would be less, sometimes as low as 5.
Okay, so we're talking about a 99-seat restaurant with a full bar and service, right? So you're going to have wait staff between 10 and 15. Now, I've run a few restaurants. That's absurd. I hate to say that. I'm not calling you a liar, Mike.
Well,
I'm
you
just
can say
saying
what
you're
you want.
misinformed.
You often do.
Yeah, you're just misinformed.
Yeah.
I
You're
mean,
not.
10 and 15
All right, let's have a
works good.
conversation through the chair, okay?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not
Okay,
gonna be
let's skip
insulted.
that. I just
uh,
think that's underestimated. Let's just say that I think that's a low estimate. So we still need a place for them to park. So parking, we could say we have a giant lot and all that is true. But the reality is the restaurants that exist now, and not only just Navarro, the other restaurants included, are an incredible burden on this neighborhood. And I don't think your proprietor totally understands that. You know, he was asked at one point to put up a small sign that gave locations of your remote lots, and it never happened. So we really haven't had much cooperation from the proposed proprietor. The neighborhood hasn't. The neighborhood association hasn't. So we're wondering why, and I think the board should consider this, that the applicant really, we don't feel like he's been a good neighbor and hasn't really helped to try to mitigate some of these issues. Now, I understand he's trying to run a business, and that's fantastic. We want something to go in the neighborhood association and the neighbors, because I've canvassed a lot of them. They want something at upstairs at the fruit center. They want more retail and another restaurant, whatever the amenity is. They want it to happen, but they don't want to have it at the expense of their right to peaceful enjoyment, which is, I think, what this proposed restaurant right now with the hours is going to be. But you know, that's for the board to decide, not me. But I'm just telling you what we are concerned about. The noise, you know, is going to be closed. The windows are going to be closed. You know, a breezy August night, who's going to say that the windows can't be open? If they're going to be closed, why do they open? Why do they operate? Why are they openable if they're always going to be closed? If you're serious about them always being closed, then why don't you just permanently have them fixed? You know, the baseline study is all well and good, but that noise, that baseline noise, ends now at the very latest 7 p.m. when the market closes. You're talking about taking that baseline and ramping it up to 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock after the final people leave. And then there's the staff that has to clean, and then they have to drive out. So again, this is, you know, an additional burden on the neighborhood. As long as that kitchen's operating, the exhaust fans have to be on. The exhaust fans are on the residential side of the roof. They face the housing. Now, I know there's a new system that's going to go in. I don't think it's going to be any quieter, since it has to be stronger to take care of the extra odors. And I hope that that helps mitigate the horrible smells that start at 6 a.m. in the morning for those residents who don't even like to walk their dog because of those smells. Hopefully, that's taken care of. But as far as noise, that's going to go on until, you know, until the kitchen's clean. As far as the baking, you know, issue, yes, there has been a kitchen there. It was never really, it was just done. Nobody ever asked for permission to do it. But it is not just for the Milton location. It is also for the the Hingham Street location. It is a commissary for both. And originally, I believe the permit was not for baking, but it was for one store. Now there are two, and probably, let's face it, it's probably 10 times the volume it was in 82. They're both very successful operations, and they never had prepared foods until, I don't know, recently. Mark could, you know, answer that better exactly when. But anyhow, that has become a big part of their business. Therefore, that kitchen is a bigger operation. Ideally, you know, that kitchen should be not there, in my opinion. It would be better serving the neighborhood if it was a retail place, and that would solve a lot of problems. That kitchen could be, why couldn't they find room in Hingham? Why do the Milton residents have to take the burden and the issues of the additional work that's being done there instead of the Hingham residents? Maybe they should find a neutral spot in an industrial park, like a lot of commissaries are. But that's something that should be addressed. And Ms. McKettrick said, there were plenty of other little shops that were there before. Well, none of them got a permit. So it's an ongoing thing that the marketplace has been sort of just operating as they want. And believe me, I know what an amenity that marketplace is to the neighborhood. And I would hate to see it go away. But I would like to see it adhere to the same regulations and the same process that every other business in town has to go through. So I hope the board can think of that. Bars, if you're I said this, if you're required to eat and drink, who is going to monitor that? The drinks going from the main room to the dining room in a bar, you know, if you only have 10 people working, I assume there's five or six in the kitchen, and I assume you have 3 or 4 servers, then who is going to watch every table who gets up and, oh, there's Frank, he's over there in the pizza bar, I'm going to go see him, or vice versa, I'm done eating my pizza, I want to go watch the game in the other room. Um, he's going to walk across, that person is going to walk across with a glass. And I understand that that's going to be maybe even stated, you can't do this, but people are people, especially after they have a few drinks. So that's a dicey proposition. I don't know how to get around it, but I say that is a major concern of my neighbors, saying that we have people drinking. There could be someone with a Manhattan and a woman walking by with a baby in a carriage, or a 15-year-old girl trying to buy a blouse at the queue, right next to each other, bumping into each other as they walk through the hallway. That is the truth. There is no getting around that. That commingling can happen.
Thank,
16 seats at the bar, in the back, but there's room for more spots. If you look at the drawing, the bar actually extends further, but there's no seats there. Why? It would be a question, because it just seems like it's pretty easy that if you get crowded and people are waiting or maybe standing behind people at the bar, as they do at Navarro, right? So now you have 16 people seated. How many people standing behind you is going to be allowed? And then, well, let's just grab a couple of stools and put them up. It's just like too easy, and it has to be monitored. Why can't we eliminate that section of the bar? They say there's going to be no sports, but we're going to have a television. Now, okay, what's going to be on the television? These are all things that are you can say you're not going to do them, that there's really no way to monitor them. So why let's eliminate the television. And I listen, March Madness is going to come up. There's going to be games on from 2 o'clock in the afternoon on. Believe me, there's going to be a basketball game on that TV, and believe me, there's going to be people in there watching the game, having a beer, and I might be one of them. So that is the truth. There's so many things that are odd about this location that I really feel like it's just
Mr.
misstep.
D'Amato,
Yeah.
we got a lot of other people to hear.
Yeah, okay. I thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I ran long, but those are things that I absolutely knew about the plate, and I thought they were worthy.
thank
One
you.
other thing that I have to say is that the plate's lease called for a 9 p.m. closing, but that was a 9 p.m. dark closing, opposed to what they're saying is a 10 p.m. And if you come in at 9:45, you could still get in. The plate's lease was for 9 p.m. That was lights out. That means cleaned, staff gone, lights out. So if you're talking about 10 p.m., that's the way it should be if you want apples to apples. Okay,
you.
thanks.
Bill, is there anybody else who'd like to speak in opposition to the application?
We have a sole Eva.
My name
Hello?
actually is Eva Legaspi Saint Silva. I live on Bassett Street, and currently, I'm sorry. Hello.
I said, welcome.
Oh, sorry, my audio is not very clear. Thank you. I currently we have a problem about parking, blocking our driveway. People are blocking my driveway, and I've had to call the police and had one car towed because I couldn't park in my driveway. I had to drive around, do some errands because my driveway was blocked. And many times people park um, blocking half of my driveway, that when I back out of my driveway, my tire drops off to my neighbor's grass. So I don't know if I heard it correctly that there are 6 parking spots for employees, but there will be 10 to 15 employees. So where are the rest of the employees going to park? I am pretty sure that they're going to park on Bassett Street in front of our houses, blocking our driveway. So that's my main concern.
What number of Bassett are you at?
47?
47, okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, if you notice the grass on my neighbor's next door neighbor is already ruined because my car always drops off to their, grass area because my driveway is blocked halfway.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll
Thank
ask the applicant will address the applicant's got has indicated that he hasn't gone through all of the issues that have been raised in the last couple of days. I think that's a fair characterization of what the applicant's testimony was. So just ask the applicant to put a finer point on the parking concern that's been expressed. Please make.
There on Franklin Street, there is a sign that people are allowed to park for 1 hour. I don't know why they can't put a sign on our street similar to that, so that people are not parking all day in front of our house, blocking our driveway.
Fair point. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bill?
Yep, we now have Carol Joyce Harrington.
Welcome to the
Hello.
Board of Appeals.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Carol.
Okay. I would correct the last caller's comment about the signage. It's actually a 30-minute parking, and we had that put up there by the chief of police at the time when Abbey Park went into business, because all his employees were parking all along Franklin Street, and we too could not get out of our driveways. And we've seen a resurgence of that since the 4 Franklin Street lot has gone bye-bye, that we've got people parking all along both sides on the grass strips. I have no grass left from, the sidewalk to the street. So it's an enforcement thing. We keep calling the police, and then they tell you that they have to drive by so many times they don't chalk tires anymore. Even though you tell them the guy's been out there for 2 hours, he's up at Abbey Park at the bar. So just to let you know that there was a sign there, but it's for 30 minutes. I am also from Franklin Street, 41, and we're at the back of the fruit center. Most of my neighbors across the way directly abut the back of the fruit center. And we have been working with Michael for years on trying to figure out how to get rid of these smells. There's got to be a condition in any permit that says that they have these electrostatic precipitators installed and tested before any restaurant goes in there. He's installing 3 of them just for his commercial kitchen alone, is my understanding. And then the restaurant needs one as well. The other thing was the hours, and Andy alluded to 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock for the plate was a dark close. Same thing with the restaurant. If they're saying 10 o'clock, that's not a dark time. You've got another hour of cleaning and, people trying to get out of there. And a question about the Bassett parking, I was confused, as well as the last caller. Is that in the town lot, which is the top of when you go into the fruit center? that's the town lot, or are they actually parking on Bassett? Because you've got a 40B going in there. And you know as well as I do that there were talks that the 40B wanted to have an Uber cutout for, Uber Eats and whatever to be delivered there, and that was canned because there's just no way. The streets are too narrow. These are residential streets. And if you've got cars parked on both sides, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare now. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carol. Let me ask the applicant that. I'm interested in that myself. When you refer to Bassett Street, where is that? I know where Bassett Street is. Where's the parking
Okay,
that's being referred to?
facing Bassett Street, as you
Yeah.
go into the fruit center.
Yeah.
On the right side is a lot leased by the town for $0. That's the municipal parking lot.
Yeah.
On the left side is part of the fruit center parking lot. The spaces that we're talking about, they're talking about designating for employees will be in the fruit center parking lot, inside the parking lot.
On the left side.
Yeah, there's also permit parking that in general, the restaurants will say they're going to require their employees to use permit parking. That's available throughout the square. The other option that a restaurant would have would be to require that their employees use the permit parking. But the reason for specifying 6 spaces at least in the parking lot for employees is we know that everybody avoids going any further away than they have to. And it seemed like a good idea to actually designate some parking out of this space for employees. So that's the reason for the proposal. It is in the fruit center parking lot, not on the street. It is not in the municipal lot.
Thank you. So I think that addresses one of Ms. Joyce Harrington's comments. And thank you, Marion. Bill, is there anybody else wishes to speak in opposition to the application?
I do not see any further hands.
Let me ask the members of the board. Is there anybody who wishes to speak in support that has recently joined the hearing? Okay, let me ask members of the board if they've got any further questions of the applicant.
I do not.
Mr. Hart?
No.
All right, let me make a suggestion of what I think we need to do. I think we have an incomplete application at this point by the applicant's own admission, and by some testimony, and by the fact that the board has asked the building inspector to supplement the preliminary report we've got regarding compliance with the current variance. I'd like to make a suggestion that we continue this hearing to another date. And I'd like to ask the applicant to supplement the materials that have been provided to the board with a response to the extent the applicant deems it necessary or is interested in responding. Speaking as the acting chair, the board will request that you respond, but we're not going to require that you respond. That's up to you. It's your application. To several issues that have come up in the correspondence, and to Mr. Modestino's point, a fair bit of this came in today. I understand. I've looked at it, but I haven't studied it. There's also been some testimony tonight that really isn't in front of the board. Must be in front of the planning board because it's not in front of us. So I'm really interested in the zoning issues, and to the extent you want to address some of the issues that have come up, it's perfectly you're right, but you know what the zoning issues are. They've come up again and again in these letters, and they surround, I think, the primary issues about which you have expressed concern. I also think it should be clear, or maybe it's not clear to me now, but this baking issue, is it related to the restaurant or not? It seems like it's an unrelated activity. So I think that should be clear. And then maybe a little bit of a history of what's going on at the property. I think that would be helpful. So that's what I'd like from the applicant. Speaking to Bill for a second, I'd like you to ask Mr. White to complete the report. Now, the report, if the applicant doesn't have it, you should have the report. The report indicated there's substantial compliance with the variance. And, and the only issues that the town was not able to verify were things that had to do with the overnight activity, some of which are being modified or you're asking to be modified. But I'd like that report, given the length of time that the variance has been outstanding. 82, let's see, that's 42 years. Is that right?
Yes.
42 years. I want to have that for the record. And then I'd like to ask to postpone, to reschedule to continue this hearing to another date mutually acceptable. That's my proposal as acting chair. Is that acceptable to the applicant?
Yes.
Can I just ask for just a slight clarification?
Yes.
A question about the baking. Is there some objection on the part of the board to including correcting conditions that we found because we examined all the old decisions with this application,
No.
even if they're not related to the restaurant?
No.
Okay.
No, but they need to be dealt with separately because when they come in together, you're assuming that there's related to the restaurant. I mean, the variance runs with the land.
So we'll make it, we will clarify.
I think it needs to be.
Yeah.
For all of the reasons that Mr. D'Amato indicated. I also think the parking should be clarified. I mean, it's a lot of issues with parking. We don't have to go over the parking. And Ms. Joyce Harrington, who was at all the 40B hearings, as was I, knows more about parking than any of us would know. And for that, I'm grateful. But I know the parking issues are significant. So if that's acceptable, I'd like to, and is that acceptable to my colleagues on the board?
Yeah, I think I just want to make, to everybody who's watching and all the rest of the stuff, that there's limits to what we're being asked to do. And so lots of the testimony relates to issues that we have no control over. And that people really need to understand that the Board of Appeals can only do so much. We can't wave a magic wand and solve all of the situational issues in East Milton, however much we might like to. So I just want to make sure that we understand that we're staying within our lane.
So noted. Excellent point. Mr. Hart, anything to add?
No, and no objections to postponing either.
Mr. D'Amato, did you want to be recognized?
Yes, to Ms. O'Donnell's point, what is it? Can you just identify exactly what is under your purview so that we don't keep bringing up things that aren't?
I don't care. It doesn't matter if you do or you don't. That's fine. With the issues in front of us are the 5 variance modifications that were requested. I will say conditions related to those run the gamut. But for example, there's been no testimony, nothing offered to the board regarding a 2-drink minimum. That's not an issue in front of us. We're hearing conditions on the hours, the seating, the sufficiency of parking, security, and baking. But for us to answer your question is really, it's impossible to do that because of the nature of the kinds of conditions that might be proposed. I think her point was the applicant hasn't come to us and said, I want to open a restaurant. We're going to have a 2-drink minimum in the pizza bar. That's not in front of us. That's an example.
Okay, and if that were to be a condition, would that be brought to them from the planning board, or is that through your board?
It's a
We don't
liquor
know.
license issue.
It's a liquor Okay, there you go. There's my answer. Excellent. Thank
That's
you.
not in front of us.
And
Okay.
then the previous stuff, is that going to be taken care of ahead of moving forward? In other words, the whole baking issue and all that, that's part of what you're going to take care of now?
That's part of what we're going to address.
Okay. Again, thank you for your time, Mr.
You're
Mullen.
welcome. You're welcome. All right, let me ask the applicant at what point, whether you have a preference as to what day this hearing is continued to.
I don't have any specific preference.
I like to hear what's available.
Mr. Donnelly,
Well, the only conflicts I have are on March 24th and April 7th right now.
Yeah.
And if we were going out, I will be away for the week of May 13th to May 21st, so I won't be available if we go that far out.
The 24th works for me.
Mr. Mullen, is,
24th is
I
Mr.
think,
Hart,
and maybe this is a question for the applicant, how much time do we need exactly? In other words, when should we start looking?
Mr. White has indicated he would not take long to complete his report. That's the pacing item, I think, from the town's perspective. I think we would ask the applicant to get us any supplemental materials not later than 1 week before the date of the hearing to permit us a weekend to review the materials. So I am wondering whether or not a date of, say, April 2nd might work. That's a Wednesday.
I can't do it on the second. I have a
Can't do
dress
it on the-
rehearsal. Yeah,
How
sorry.
about the 1st?
I can do that.
I'm not available then. I'm not available on Tuesday, Mr. Mullen.
How
Any
about the
Tuesday.
31st?
Also a dress rehearsal.
Hmm. How about the 3rd?
Yeah.
I can make that work.
Applicant, can the applicant make the 3rd work?
Yes.
Yes, I believe that. Yes.
Mr. Donnelly,
April 3rd looks good.
April 3rd at 7 o'clock.
Absolutely.
This hearing is continued until 7 o'clock at April 3rd, on April 3rd, at which point we'll hear further testimony from the applicant. We'll hear a report. We'll be provided with a report from the town that the board will present to the public. The public will have an additional opportunity to speak to the merits of the application. And time permitting, we will debate its merits at that time. Is any further business in front of the board this evening?
No, I want to thank you for your time and the board's time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to see you all. Have a good evening.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you for
Meeting
considering
is-
my dress
board is-
rehearsals.
Board is adjourned.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.